There's a variety of finishes you could apply to this box. I'm going to use a very simple one. I'm going to burn some of it with a torch. I'm going to use one of these hand propane torches, and I'm going to burn a section in this area here, and then I'll just let it kind of taper out naturally to wherever it goes. I'm only going to burn that one section. I think it'll make a nice effect. I'm kind of curious to see what it looks like. So we'll do that before we put the finish on. You obviously don't want to apply a torch to a box that's had its finish already applied. So we'll see how it comes out. I've applied the darkest portion to the center, and now I'll just taper it in every direction. After looking at it a little, I decided I want to make the burn effect a little bit darker. Okay, I like that a little better. I think that came out nice. And I'm just going to head over to the sanders and just give it a very quick sand just to smooth it back out before I put the finish on it. Well, whenever you apply the torch to a project, you never know how it's going to come out. But we're an IB school, and one of our traits that we encourage is being a risk taker. And in this case, I think it turned out pretty good. I gave it a quick sand and just kind of tapered it real nice. I'm going to go ahead and put the finish on the box now, and we're almost done with this project. Next step will be putting the hinges on it, and then it'll be done. One of my favorite finishes is this Watco Danish oil finish. It just comes out so nice. It just brings a luster to the grain, and it shows all the pattern of the grain without obscuring any of it. So I'm going to go ahead and apply some of this with a foam brush. You can go ahead and put on a little extra more than you need, and then we'll wipe off the extra. I always start with the hardest to get to parts first, so the inside, all the corners and everything. The idea is to minimize the amount of fingerprints all over this thing, so if you start with the hardest to get to parts, you'll end up keeping it as clean as you can possibly keep it. Once you get it completely covered, go back over it one more time and just make sure you got the whole thing. And once we're done, we'll wipe it all off. I'm not going to make you sit and watch me put this finish on for the whole box. So I'll see you back here when I'm done. I'll show you how to wipe it clean. Now that the finish has been completely applied, you're going to go back and wipe the thing down exactly in the order that you did your finish in. We want to make sure we wipe off all the extra. It should basically look like it's dry. It looks really nice if you leave it wet, but what'll happen is tomorrow you'll have a sticky mess on your hands and it won't look very good. So just make sure to wipe off every little bit. I try to use two rags. That way I'm not getting my fingerprints all over everything. Wipe the inside out so it's nice and good. Then transfer to the outside. That way as I'm turning this around and it's touching the wet spots on the table, it can get as much as it wants all over it, but my final wipe will be to get the rest of this stuff all dried out. And then tomorrow morning we'll check out how it came out. One of the important things to remember is that whenever you're using this Danish oil, it can spontaneously combust as it dries. So if you wad these into a tight ball and then you throw them into the garbage, what'll happen is it traps all the heat inside, and as they dry, they generate a lot of heat, and it could actually catch on fire. I actually had a student do that one year. Well, I've had it a couple of times, and I've always caught it. But I can remember one, I came back from lunch, and I saw one of the garbage cans smoking. And what had happened is somebody thrown theirs away. It was a tightly crumpled piece of paper, and it just had started to catch on fire. So it hadn't actually lit up yet, but it was generating enough heat to make some smoke. So just be very careful when you're using this stuff. The ways to dispose of it safely are take it outside, spread out the cloth flat, put a rock on it so it doesn't blow away, and then let it dry out. Once it's dry, it's perfectly safe, but while it's drying, it'll generate a lot of heat. Another way you can do it is dispose of it in a fire bin. That's what we do here at the school. And then also, if you need to, you could always put it in a plastic bag and get it wet so that it can't dry out. But make sure you're very careful with this stuff, because it can and will light on fire. And as always, when you're done, clean up your space. And I'll see you back when we're putting the hinges on it. Well, it's the next day, so welcome back. We're over here at the box, and we're going to put the final touches on it. We're going to add the hinges to it today, and then the box will basically be done unless you wanted to spray a finish over it. In this case, I'm not going to. I'm perfectly happy the way it came out like this. So before you get started, double check that your box top and box are lined up, and make sure that you're going to do all of this stuff to the back side of the box. I've had numerous students throughout the years not pay attention and accidentally end up putting the hinges on the front side of the box. So just double check, make sure you have your box oriented the correct way. First thing we're going to do is we're going to need to put some spacers in between the top and the bottom. What I usually do is crumple up some paper. Well, not crumple it up, but fold it up. And I'm going to start with paper, I guess this would be 4 thick. Okay, and I just made little spacers like so. What happens is if you put the hinges on without any gap in between the top and the bottom, what will happen is when you go to put the hinges on, they will tighten down and the box lid will stay slightly open like this. So we gotta make sure that little spacer gap is in there. So get your box oriented the way it's supposed to go. Get your little spacers, and I usually recommend using clamps. It'll just act like a third hand. Take your spacers, put them in the crack between the top and the bottom half. You need to make sure there's enough room so that you can feel the sides of the box. You got to make sure everything lines up perfect. So that's an important thing. So I just made my shims a little bit shorter. Okay, so that's going to keep a gap in there. And now I'm going to go kind of cinch this down just a bit. That kind of holds it into place for me so I can finalize making sure the locations are all perfectly even, the box is all perfectly lined up, everything seems good over here. And just double check a few times. Once you get that established, now what we need to do is make sure that this crack is perfectly even and symmetrical all the way across. If you can slip a piece of paper in here, usually that's pretty good and you could call that done. Let's try doing 2 thick, see how it comes out. So I could fit a folded piece of paper in there, and I'm gonna actually tighten this up just a little bit more. I like it to be about 1 paper thickness. Okay, so that's pretty good there. And just make sure that it looks even all the way across. So that's kind of the gap that I'm looking for right there. Now we can go ahead and start installing the hinges. I'm going to set my combo square to 1 inch because that's the spacing that I like. There's no magic number. I just like 1 inch because of the looks of it. You can choose your own measurement. So grab your hinges, lay them out flat. I'm going to use these little tiny brass hinges. They're pretty nice. If you want to use bigger ones or more decorative ones, you can always change to those as well. But these are what I'm going to use for this box. I'm going to set my combo square up at 1 inch distance from the end, and then I'm going to line my hinge up so that it's perfectly even with the crack. So the hinge should be lined up perfectly with the crack. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. Take your time on this step. It's an easy one to screw things up. So now that I've got the hinge exactly where I want it, I'm going to keep one finger on the hinge at all times. So I'll pull one hand away so that I can draw my circles. But I'm always keeping one hand on it. And the reason is once I have that hinge where I want it, I don't want it to move on me. And I'm just tracing the little holes where the screw is going to go. Again, you can move your hand around, but always keep one finger onto the hinge. Now that those little marks are drawn, I'm going to go ahead and center punch the center of them. Now that those are done, I'm going to drill them out with a pilot hole. And I've got a tiny little screw here. And what I want to do is make sure I don't drill all the way through the box. I don't want the holes for the screws to appear on the other side. So it's a simple matter. I'm just going to take the drill bit, I'm going to line it up with the screw and see how deep the screw is. And then I'm going to put my tape exactly the depth of the screw. Exactly the depth of the screw. Once I've got that marked, I can go ahead and pilot hole all the drill holes. It's now time to put the screws in. So the first step with this is to just go ahead and get all of the screws started. Now, these are tiny little screws, and on top of that, they're brass. So they're very easy to break. And when I say very easy, I mean very, very easy to break. You got to be careful when you're installing these. This is a bad step to mess up now that you've done all the work to get your box all the way to the end. You wouldn't want some little screw up here to cause you a bunch of time. It's notoriously hard to get broken screws out of projects, and so getting the skill to drive them in without cross-threading them or breaking them or putting too much torque on them and snapping the heads off, that's a very important skill to get. It costs you a lot of time and effort to fix little mistakes like this. If you do break one off, an easy suggestion is to just go get a little bit bigger hinge and simply cover the old messed up holes with the new hinge. Alright, so I've got all the screws started. When you go to tighten these things, we want to do it nice and even. We don't want to torque down one side, because then the plate will come this way when you torque that down, and then I go to torque the other side down, and it will put twice as much pressure on this side. So what I'd like is these hinges to go down nice and flat and even. So all I'm doing right now is I'm getting all the screws to be pretty close to snug. So they're not quite pushing on the hinge yet, but they're getting there. Now, if you go to drive in any of these screws and they're a little bit too tight, just stop and re-drill the pilot hole just a little bit bigger. It's very, very easy to break these screws, and again, it's a lot of work to fix them. So just take your time. If they go in real rough, pull the screw out, just re-drill the pilot hole, and that will take out just enough material for the screw to go in nice and easy. Now, sometimes when you center punch pine, you'll have the drift move a little bit and the hole won't be quite centered. Now on this hole here, that's what I had happen. I tried to fix it a little bit, but pine is notoriously tough because these dark lines here where the grain grows really slow in the winter are a lot harder than this white grain here, and the white grain is the fast growth in the summer. So it's real soft compared to the slower growth, and because of that, it's really hard sometimes to center punch pine exactly where you want. So I screwed one of these holes up. In fact, this is the one that I screwed up. So what I'm going to do is tighten all the other ones down, give or take, pretty close, because they'll center it up where I want it to be, and then I'll worry about the one that's off in just a second. So again, nice and even. I want to get all of them. I do a little here, a little here, a little here, and just kind of work my way down. Little each time, and then you want to go just till these things stop. Do not crank them, they will break. So just till you see that screw sit into the slot perfectly, and then go ahead and leave it. Now the one that's messed up, I waited till the end because it's only off just a little bit, and what I want to do is tighten this one down now. And because this is soft, you know, pine is soft, or wood in general is pretty soft, and it's a small screw, so it will kind of conform into the position that I want. Okay, now it's time to check how it came out. You see how it has a nice even line across the sides. Here's the front, so it closes all the way. Again, nice even line, and goes all the way across the back. So that's what you're looking for when you put these hinges on, and you should get a nice action that way. And there you've got it. We've got a nice completed box. This first time you build this, it'll take you a lot of time. After that, you could put them together in just probably, I don't know, maybe an hour or two. Well, I hope you enjoyed making this box as much as I did, and I'll see you back for the next project. Remember, Pine Box concludes all of your basic projects. It's now time to start thinking about your advanced project.